Hello everyone, welcome back. So it's been some time, but we're finally back. And in our last video, we looked at the background property, the background CSS property, and how we can use it to add things like images and colors and so on. Now, in today's video, we'll be looking at CSS gradients, which are just a mixture of different colors. So in CSS, we have three different types of gradients, such as, and they're called linear gradients, radial gradients, and conic gradients. So we'll be looking at each one of them. So first of all, let's just get rid of our images to enable our page load better, and just get rid of most of this. So we can have this and name it linear gradients. So now we'll be styling this div. Let's save this file. So first we'll give it a width of about 500 pixels, a height of same 500 pixels. Then to give it a linear gradient, so getting pop up here, so you set the background property to linear gradients. So before we go into any one of these, let's just look at just using colors. So now to add a gradient, you must set two colors. So in this case, we have red and blue. So now if we save this and go back to the web page, the result we'll have is a color going from red to blue. So just like this. So we have red going to blue. So the default direction is top to bottom. So but we can change this. Can set it here. So the first variable that we'll give it is the position. So just say to right, whichever position you want your gradient to move, whether to right, to top, to bottom, or to left, wherever, just set it here. So to right, we'll have our gradient. Okay, let's save this file. So now our gradient should move from the left to the right. So let's first of all get rid of this red box so it doesn't confuse us. So now our gradient moves from the left to the right. So in a gradient, you can add as many colors as you need. So I can add, let's say, green, purple, and so on. But always add colors that actually blend in so your gradient doesn't look awful. So let's save this and look at our results. So this is what we have. If I increase the width so that it will be more fleshed out, 1000 pixels. Then so the width of the individual colors depends on the width of the parent. So let's look at the to bottom, which is default. Save. So this is it. Then we also have to left, which is just the reverse. So always remember to save. Then also have to top, save and go back, just this. But now we also have, you can also make your colors start from the edges, from diagonal edges. So it can go from the top to bottom right. So let me just give an example. So we can say to bottom. Now apart from just bottom, we also want to go from to the bottom right, which is going from the top here to the bottom right. So all our colors will start from here and just flow in here. So let's refresh, and that's it. Let's get rid of some of the colors to really get an idea of it. So this is how it looks. Let me put colors that look good flowing into each other. Okay. So in this you can just put any colors you want that you think would look good in your gradients. So this is just basically what we have. Then that's basically it for linear gradient. So as we have to bottom right, we also have to top right. So the colors will just start from the bottom going to the top right. So that's it. Then you can change this to top left to top, so to bottom left. You can just play around with it and see the results that you get using the linear gradients. But now we can also use degrees. So without just setting all this, you can set whichever degree you want the colors to flow at. So if I set a degree of 180 degrees, so 180 degrees is just basically horizontal, so our colors are just flowing from the top to the bottom. But now if you just play with this a bit, let's set 90 degrees. So 90 degrees should be flowing to the right. Yes. So the more you increase it or decrease, the more the colors will turn at a point. So you can just play around with degrees and see the results you can get. And that's basically it for linear gradient. So we'll be moving over to the second type of gradient, which is the radial gradient. So now before we move over to that, we have, apart from linear gradients, we have repeating linear gradients. So let's just get rid of this. Let's save this and see the results. But just in most cases you'll be using just the linear gradient. Let's get rid of some of our colors here. Save. Let's give this some percentages. So this can be 10, and this can be 20. And now you get repeating linear gradients. So you can add more colors to this. So let's say again. So you can just play around with this and see the results you get. I personally don't use anything like repeating linear gradients. If I'm using a gradient, I just use linear gradient or radial gradient, but most of the time just linear gradients. But for the sake of this, we'll be looking at all of them. So that's it for that. Let's take this back. Let's get rid of these percentages. And yeah, that's our linear gradient right there. So now let's create another div for a radial gradient. Now a radial gradient is just basically like a circular gradient which starts from the middle going out. So select this class. So let's add a bit of margin to this so we have some spacing between our gradients. So we can just copy this width and height. And for the radial gradients, the same way we created our linear gradients, we use the background property. Can either use the background property or background image or background color, but for simplicity I just use background, and this time we go for radial gradients. So let's just get this option and see. So let's save and go back, and as you can see, this is the results that we get. So all the colors start from the center, radiating out in a circular form. So let's get rid of this. Then we can also add percentages to our colors to determine the intensity. So this can be 5, 15, let's say 60%. Let's see our results, and yeah, so you can just add percentages to determine the intensity of how much you want a color to be shown. So 5% just shows it a bit, and 60% takes up most of the gradient. So that's how you can determine how large you want the colors to be. Then, just like as we saw in the beginning, if you want, let's first get rid of this, save and go back. As you can see, by default the radial gradient does not go in a circular manner, but if you want that, you can use just set shape to circle at the beginning, then save, and there you have it, a circular gradient. Then same for radial gradient, we also have repeating radial gradients, and same thing we did for the linear gradient. You also have to add a percentage of its intensity to the colors. So you can just go for 10 and 15 for simplicity, then save, go back and refresh, and this is just basically what you have. So you can just play around with repeating radial gradients and linear gradients and so on, and if you get rid of the shape, which is circle, you get a different result. So something like this. So you can just play around with it and see results that you get. So for the last type of gradient, we have our conic gradient. So let's first return this to how we want it, or just to the default manner, which is this. Okay, first get rid of the percentages. So if you need to make reference to this, you can see how to create a default gradient. So now the last but not the least is the conic gradients. So conic gradients, then copy this, save, then same here, style it, give it a width of 500 pixels, a height of 500. Okay, last we used using 1000, so let's give it a height, a width of 1000 pixels. Then same thing, you set the background and conic cake gradient. So most of the time when using gradients, you just basically be using either the linear or radial gradients, but just for the sake of this, I'm showing you this last one. So it's actually conic, yeah, conic gradient. So save this and go back to our web browser. As you can see, this is the result that we get. So basically a conic gradient is just a gradient with color transitions rotated around a center point. So starting from here, the colors are just transitioned around. So our colors of yellow, orange and red just like in a spinning round this point. Then so you can add as many colors as you want, and you can also add basically degrees to this colors. So let's look at that. Let's first add in margins so you can get some spacing between these gradients. So let's just look at the degrees. So you can add this to 45. Okay, let's just accept this suggestion, save and see what we get. So as you can see, just with degrees you get how and where the colors should be shown. And once again, you can just play around with this. I personally don't use this often, so if it's something that you feel will look good in your website, you can use it and learn more about it. And we can also create a pie chart or a pie chart looking element using the conic gradients. So to achieve something like that, we need a square. Set this 500 pixels, and if you remember, we use border radius to add rounded corners to our elements. So to get a circle, a perfect circle, you use 50%, which rounds off all edges. So let's see the results. And yeah, so this is a circle, and so to get a simple looking pie chart, you can just add as many colors as you want. So just copy some colors and put in here, save, and this is the result we get, something resembling a pie chart. So and you can just add simpler colors too, just using the degrees. And yeah, so basically, as I said, I'm not familiar with using the conic gradients. Most times when building a professional website, you mostly just make use of linear gradients, and in some rare cases a radial gradient. So just taking this from W3 Schools. So as I recommended in a previous video, you can check out W3 Schools for anything that you need further knowledge on. So let's see the result we get here. And yeah, so as you can see, we actually our charts actually look a little more three-dimensional, but that's just something you can explore further and see what you can achieve. So we also have one more example here, which will be the last I'll be looking at, and it's also playing around with degrees. First save your CSS file, and basically, so you can just achieve a lot using your conic gradients. But as I said, you most likely not be making use of it when building a functional website. Most likely be using linear gradients and radial gradients. But a word of advice: when using gradients, it's best not to overuse them, because at a point it can make your website look a bit childish and unprofessional. So yeah, that'll be it for this video, and I hope you've learned how how to create simple gradients in CSS. So your gradients don't have to be something complex. You can just use basically two different colors. So I can decide to use in this linear gradient cyan and blue and just set it to the direction to bottom right, and we get a good result with that. So your gradients don't have to be anything crazy, just something simple can suffice. So you can just play around with this and see what you can create, and bye for now and see you in the next video.